Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Club at the End of the World, where in this first hour, we're focusing on the topic of refreezing the Arctic. And we'll get into an overview of why that's an important topic and what exactly we're setting out to achieve. But first, I want to welcome everyone and say good morning and hear you all say good morning. So good morning and welcome, everyone. We got Adam in Olympia, Washington. We've got Dan in Chicago. We got Jason in Long Beach. We've got Michael somewhere in the southeast of France along the coast there. And we've got Hurricane Victoria in Oklahoma. Welcome all. I'm going to go on mute, give you all a chance to say hello.
Yeah, I'm Dan from Chicago. Glad to be here. Glad to be alive. And with full acknowledgement that time may be rather short. Good to see you all and anybody else out there.
Oh, Victoria, you're on mute, sister. You're on mute.
I always look forward to this, so hello to everyone, and it's just great to have this group, and I hope that people out there that are watching, that are isolated, that feel like they don't have a voice, please join us because some really great people here.
Yeah, it's great to have a front porch we can all sit on and talk together. These issues are important.
Exactly. Now, I know Jason's driving and Michael had some bandwidth issues there a few minutes ago, so we won't bug them. Just feel free to jump in anytime, gentlemen and lady. And you, by the way, if you're watching this, you are welcome to join. You can join us here on the front porch. Grab a seat. There's plenty of chairs. There's potato chips and Coke, and I think somebody was even passing around a bong earlier. But anyway. I'm just saying, come one, come all. Welcome to the conversation, and so just to kind of give some. First, let me give some preliminary, about the Social Club at the End of the World. What is this thing, and then I'll talk about refreezing the Arctic and some context for that. And jump in, everybody. This is the front porch. You can talk at any time. You don't need to wait to be called upon. We generally don't encourage interruption, but if just jump in. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference between interrupting and just jumping in. So, all right. So the Social Club at the End of the World is, as you can tell, very informal, and it's sort of like, you could think of it as a kind of a cross between a support group and a think tank. The support group, we come together and grapple with the fact that we may not have much time left. Mother Earth is dying. We, humanity, are destroying Mother Earth and other species and ecosystems, not to mention the destruction we're causing to our own species and our own, hearts and spirits and potential by driving this crazy overshoot, this machinery of overshoot, and over-exploitation and over-destruction of life on Earth. So oh, hello. I want to welcome Alex. Alex, welcome to the call. How are you?
Hi, Jamin. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Welcome.
Sorry. Hi, Jamin. I want to say hi to all my brothers and sisters. I found you on YouTube. I do a podcast. I interviewed Guy McPherson, and you showed up on the additional little boxes that go on forever. But I'm 25, and I just started learning about the climate change, and I didn't realize that we have an exponential situation unfolding. And I agree with you that if the Arctic melts, I don't know if Guy necessarily knows what will happen, but like he says, we don't know. We've never had humans on an Earth where the Arctic melts, and maybe we get one more year, or maybe it happens this year. That's all I'll say. And I don't know. I like that. I feel great despair. I'm 25. I work at a software company, and no one knows what's going on, that our world is falling apart. And it's really sad. I almost can't talk to many people. My parents don't think it's a big problem. and it's just no one. I live in Austin, Texas, in the middle of Empire, as I think some people would call it, middle city, and no one even understands the problem. But I'll just say there. Thank you guys. Love all you guys.
Wow, thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. And you actually joined at a perfect moment, because I was just giving a little description of what the Social Club at the End of the World is, and I invite everyone to jump in on the description of it. And one of the things that characterizes the Social Club at the End of the World is compassion. We are compassionate toward all guests and participants. No one is ever put on the spot where you have to answer a question or anything like that. So this applies to you, Alex, and to anyone and everyone who joins. There's never any obligation to talk, right, or to answer a question or anything like that. So very much appreciate everyone's thoughts. So it's totally voluntary. You can just hang out and listen, and or you can jump in. And I do a lot of talking. Sometimes you'll hear me say going on mute, because I'll catch myself being loquacious. But anyway, it's again, a combined sort of support group and think tank, where we simply grapple with the hand that we've been dealt, and that we as humanity, if you think about it in longer term, that we humanity have dealt ourselves and dealt Mother Earth. And so that's kind of the support group part of it. Just having a friendly front porch where we can all show up and talk and share about our feelings, about our experiences, about our philosophizing about all this. How could it be? How could we have been so stupid? Where there's so many different angles that we can come to with this. Anyway, the think tank part of it is, okay, given all that, all right, now that we've, talked about it and had kind of a good cry about it, where do we go from here? Like, what do we do? Do we just feel depressed and, take drugs, maybe kill ourselves? I'm not suggesting that, of course, but I'm just kind of asking the rhetorical question. What do we do? Do we, try to get involved in some geoengineering effort, which is actually the topic of this first hour, refreezing the Arctic, or what, right? Do we try to get everyone to join some new religion? Jason and I have brainstormed about actually starting a religion, and in a sense, my shtick, my day job is radical collective intelligence, which one could think of as a sort of a quasi-religion, but it's not really a religion. It's simply a methodology for expanding our intelligence as a collective and mashing it up with artificial intelligence. So, but in the realm of the think tank, we grapple with all these questions. What do we do? What do we do in the face of all this? Alex, I did have a quick question for you when convenient. Had you mentioned that you had interviewed Guy McPherson, or you just saw interviews of Guy McPherson?
I interviewed him, so he's really nice. I've seen, you've literally met him in person, but if you just email him, he'll email you back. But I interviewed him I did a podcast where I was trying to cover issues the media doesn't cover, and the media doesn't cover a lot of issues. And then I stumbled upon climate change, and I didn't get to Guy, but I interviewed just some other scientists, and I progressively realized they're all lying. Like the IPCC lies. Well, not just the biggest lie is the lie of omission. I'm not going conspiracy theory. I'm not going anything. I'm just saying they do not, as Guy McPherson says, add up the feedback loops to, I think maybe Guy McPherson is a little bit exaggerating it, but they definitely just omit it completely. And that's crazy. That's just as crazy if you think Guy McPherson is off too. But I think he's closer to the near-term extinction than they see. But I mean, we'll see what happens when the Arctic melts. I agree with him on latent heat. And I've to answer your question, Tim, I've interviewed him. Yes.
No, so, there's nothing wrong with being loquacious. So long answers are welcome. No, that's really fascinating. I really appreciate your perspective, and I think you're the youngest person in the group at the moment, and that's really exciting to have someone so young and energetic. I was once 25 myself one day, believe it or not.
Oh,
that was half my, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does Alex have any great ideas for refreezing the Arctic? He said we'll see what happens when the Arctic completely thaws, but do you have any ideas for refreezing the Arctic, Alex?
Great question. So I'm a computer science engineer, and so I know he's talked about AI before. I've done AI programming, but I've heard his talk about geoshading, and I guess it would be a good idea for me to be positive. We'll see if we can get it. I would love, the president of Finland, you talked about it. He said it in front of Trump. I hold almost no hope of refreezing the Arctic just because of Trump. We have a time component, and we'll see is it supposed to melt by September? Anyway, that's when it gets to its lowest, right? So if we survive September, it won't lose this year, right? I believe that's what the charts say. So geoshading sounds good. Anything to stop ocean acidification. I mean, I don't think it's you can tell me, but I don't think it's a knowledge problem. It's a will problem. Isn't that true? I mean, it's just that no one cares enough to solve it. It's a will problem, and the problem is our two biggest polluters, I don't think give a shit. China and the USA give a shit about helping save the earth.
If I could jump in and kind of build off of a couple of things that you brought in here, Alex. One thing is that there seems to be a consensus among enough climate scientists, people who understand the actual dynamics that are unfolding. The question always seems to come down to, do we have just a few years like Guy McPherson proposes? Do we have maybe decades? Do we have until 100 years down the road, etc.? And it just seems like the precautionary principle dictates that you assume you don't have much time left, that dystopia is coming if nothing is done, and you start to do something now. The other thing connected to that is, how do you get any kind of action to be generated? And the action may require shifting of money out of military budgets, to be really blunt about just taking that money out of the military budgets, putting the military personnel to work on solving some of these problems, and have this kind of a radical reorientation. But the problem is that hardly anybody knows. And those who do know, some of these climate scientists, and I bring this up again and again, they have stated publicly that they have been intimidated. They have been threatened, intimidated. Guy McPherson has been, kind of almost totally marginalized within the scientific community. And so one of the big problems is, if anything is to be done to refreeze the Arctic, then we have to have people pushing for it, because they understand that life on this planet is going to be destroyed. And it's very, very frustrating. And I know that when you go back historically, there's been other junctures where science and the evidence has moved beyond what the consensus beliefs were, and those who stood up and said things about whether the earth revolves around the sun, etc. These kind of situations, those people have been intimidated or killed. And we also understand that, human nature is human nature. So I just wanted to throw those things out there. And I think one of the biggest questions we have is just, how do we get the public to understand what's actually happening? They don't know.
Hello, this is Adam. So last week we talked about a contractor that what we really need is a big contractor to go up there and get the job done. And so we talked about possibly running an ad in the Daily Journal American for a big contractor. And so I checked into it, and yes, anybody can run an ad there. But then I got to thinking about it, and I agree with Daniel and Alex, and because somebody should know what's going on. I mean, did Trump pull out all the, you know, I know he pulled the rug out from underneath EPA, and so, but we still have the military. I mean, they have advisors. I mean, they've got to know. So what's going on? I don't get it. Why don't they have a big contractor going up there, or do they? I don't know.
You know, I've got an answer for you, Adam. And the answer, I think, will surprise and certainly resonate with you. So over the last few days, I've struck up a really great series of conversations with a gentleman named Stuart Scott, super bright guy who Guy McPherson pointed me to. He lives in Hawaii, and he's done some amazing presentations on abrupt climate change. And so, you know, we were talking about potential solutions and what it's going to take and the root of the problem. And he told me about an experience that he had, because he's participated in a lot of these climate negotiations in Europe and different parts of the world. And so he said he was meeting with the top lobbyist for essentially the oil and gas industry for climate negotiations and whatnot. And he had an opportunity to sit down with him and essentially have, I see that somebody posted Stuart Scott. It's actually Stuart Scott, but anyway, he had participated. So he had an opportunity to sit down with this negotiator for the oil and gas industry. Obviously a very bright, educated person. And he said, look, the heads of the oil companies, they've got to know what's going on, right? They're smart people, they're educated, they're surrounded by top advisors. They've got to know what's going on. So how on earth do they continue doing what they're doing, knowing that they're destroying life on earth for their, children and grandchildren? And the negotiator guy looked him in the eyes, and after a pause, he said, look, the bottom line is money. The bottom line is money. Money makes the world go round, yada, yada, yada. Now, I see a smile forming on Adam's face, not because he's happy with the news, but because it resonates with what Adam has been talking about for so long. Victoria, you're on mute. Feel free to, I don't know if you meant to say something. Anyway.
No, I was just saying, no joke. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, of course, but it's just sad.
Well, let's grapple with it. By the way, I want to welcome Aaron, who just joined. Let me just complete this thought, Aaron, then I'll welcome you properly, to the extent that you're open to that. By the way, this is totally open to all. Anyone can join. But as far as the money thing, Adam has really been working on this issue for a long time, giving it serious, deep thought. And we had a retreat weekend before last where we dug into it for many hours. And the bottom line hypothesis that's, if not theory at this point, is that money is an addictive substance over which human beings don't have a lot of natural control. And it can be a slippery slope for any human being, rich or poor, who comes into contact with money and the allure of money. And so, I think, we may have all experienced it. I've certainly experienced it in my own life, where, it's like, wow, I can have this amount of money and then I'll be set. Oh, it's just kind of like this, wow, it's just like, and then I won't have to work anymore. I can if I want to, but I'll have the freedom. I don't have to. I mean, it's so alluring. And then of course, as a guy, you kind of pick up that a lot of women are attracted to guys who have money. And, if you think about our biology and our hormones and everything, I mean, it is a slippery slope of a sand trap waiting to happen. To all of us, and the reality is that it is happening to all of us to varying degrees, so so it's like we're all to various degrees stuck in this with this relationship to this addictive substance that is keeping us from thinking clearly and operating clearly. At multiple levels. And then you know, you get into a corporation or government or whatever, and it's all about money. Whether you're a politician, you know, working in Congress or the Senate, odds are you're there for money and power, and you're there representing the interests of the oligarchs who write you big fat checks every year to keep you in power so that you can keep looking out for their interests. So it becomes this. And when you're in a corporation or in government or wherever you are, you get into this groupthink. You start to really harmonize and resonate with the people around you who are on the same mission. And there is so much, there forms so much inertia around it that it's very hard to break out of. I see us, this group, as, you know, a very beautiful anomaly in that, fine, we may not be completely free of concerns of money and all that, but we're able to take a step back and look at it and look at the big picture. Anyway, I've been quite loquacious. I want to welcome Aaron, who has just joined. Welcome, Aaron, and feel free to jump in and introduce yourself. No pressure. There's never any pressure to talk ever on the Social Club at the End of the World.
Thank you, Jim. You know, I was just going to add too, you got to remember too, you know, these disasters can be extremely profitable. So it's not that they maybe don't know or the extent, but they may think that, you know, they are going to benefit from it somehow, at least in the short term, perhaps. You know, that's all I would really add.
Can I add one thing? You want to talk? I thought that was beautifully said in that before I discovered climate change was the biggest problem, I studied economics. A lot of people talk about neoliberalism. That's our current economic paradigm. And so essentially there's two really big issues that if we don't, it's going to lead to our extinction. Is that one, it places no value on the future, just like Jamin said. So if you work in a corporation, your value is to make as much profit as possible. If you divert from that goal, you're out. The business runs us. We do not run business. So, you know, I was reading a book and someone used this as an example. I never forgot it. If Rex Tillerson, or whoever the CEO of ExxonMobil is, you know, went down to Bermuda and smoked ayahuasca and was like, oh my God, we need to stop this deep water drilling. We need to stop, you know, killing the planet. Well, then he'd get fired by the board the next day. And if he somehow convinced the board that we should stop and the board quit, then the company would go bankrupt and they'd simply get replaced by another company that was as sociopathic as he was formerly before he did the ayahuasca. So it's just that, you know, so the one problem I mentioned there is that simply that there's nothing placed on the future. There's nothing that say, hey, this is a tree, this is nature, that value, some people call it sacred. It's intrinsic value to human life or trees or nature because it produces oxygen and we need that to live, and the oceans and blah, blah, blah. Also externalities. So a lot of people, Hansen talks about this, but the fossil fuel companies do not pay for the damage they do. It's like 9 million people get asthma a year because of the pollution is ranked. Also, I read this book by Peter Joseph. He did the Zeitgeist movement. It's a little bit conspiratorial, but it's a documentary about resource-based economics. And in 2013, the UN released a study that calculated externalities for every industry. You can look it up online. And if literally every industry, not just fossil fuels, if they had to pay their cost to society, to the environment mostly, every single major industry on earth would be bankrupt. Every single one. The actual biggest is the meat industry. So the meat industry is an externality cost of 18-1, meaning they do not pay the cost for the methane released by the cows, the destruction of the Amazon to do soy, the destruction of whatever environment to produce all the cattle. And imagine if you had to pay 18 times for your burger. So your steak, instead of $18, is $180. Sorry, it wouldn't be. It'd be, that's 10 times. It'd be 18 times 18. Is that 300 something? So that's how bad our economic system is, and most people don't even realize that. Okay, I'll stop. Anyone can go.
Well, great stuff, Alex. Love your contributions. Absolutely love them. Really great, clear thinking. But please,
Jamin, yeah, if I could, you know, in one of, I think it was the, you know, Story for Humanity group, maybe it was last week or the week before, but one of the things that's been emphasized is that the way people used to live were in small groups, you know, Dunbar's number 150, that you know, everybody knew everybody else. And when everybody knows everybody else, as was pointed out, You can't get away with things. If you are doing something which is harmful to the group, you're going to be called on it. Actually, in those kind of tribal groupings, they use group shaming. You know, if somebody goes and, you know, they're on a hunt and they try to hide their kill, try to keep it for themselves and their own nuclear family, they're going to get a group shaming. That's what happens, and it's very effective because it's painful. It doesn't necessarily require physical violence, because in a small tribal group, if you use physical violence, people become disabled or you lose a valuable group member. So shaming is what they use. And what we have today is, even though emotionally everybody is still hardwired the same way for a tribal situation, which, you know, in some ways it would be good to recreate that somewhat. We're in a situation where people can get away with all sorts of things. And what is actually happening is our planet is being destroyed, you know, and on a micro level, you know, with civilizations in the past, when they exploit their resource base and they can't really go anywhere else for one reason or another, they degenerate, they regress, and they die out. And that's part of the story of humanity, actually, is that kind of occurrence. And so, you know, at this point in time, the planet is being destroyed. Those who are doing it or who have done it, even though they may become enlightened about the fact of, oh, well, you know, I guess my selfishness, my greed, my money hoarding has led to this disaster. But what's going to happen, you know, hardwired automatic pilot, is they're going to do everything they can to keep that secret, their own responsibility and guilt, because they know how people are. If people understand what they've done because of selfishness, greed, etc., then the population or the tribe is going to turn on them. And so, you know, these are dynamics which are actually unfolding, and we need to be able to theoretically get people to really understand life on Earth is going to be disappearing. And if they, you know, and I mean, it's already happening in a lot of ways. It's there. And if the Arctic melts down completely, all that's going to do is intensify and accelerate what's already happening, because the methane is leaking out all over the place. It's an emergency. Money needs to be shifted out of the military budgets. The military personnel need to be focused on doing whatever kind of geoengineering or other strategies are necessary to put a halt to this process, if possible. So I just wanted to throw that in there, a little bit, story of humanity with what we're talking about today. And I'm going to go ahead and mute out.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, Jamin, do you mind, since you had the opportunity to speak with Stuart Scott, obviously they acknowledge that, of course, the oil companies do understand what they're doing, but it's about money. I'm just curious, were you able to ascertain any more information?
I'm sorry, I got distracted for a quick sec. Do you mind repeating the question, Victoria?
No, I said, since you had the opportunity to speak with Stuart Scott, very interesting, because basically you've got the acknowledgement that, yes, the oil companies do indeed know what they're doing. I was just wondering, were you able to, in speaking with him, ascertain anything else that would be of interest to the group, since you had that opportunity?
No, he has amazing insights. In fact, he may be joining us on the segment on the New Story for Humanity in about starting in about an hour and a half. In fact, we're going to be talking probably on a weekly basis, getting on video conferences and exploring these topics together. But you know, he at times he will succumb to a very, you know, pessimistic view. You know, it's kind of hard not to be pessimistic in the face of all this. And I've just begun to reveal to him the strategy of radical collective intelligence to come up with solutions that we can't even dream of today. And he's definitely open to that. I think the reality is that we look to our experts like Stuart Scott, Guy McPherson, for answers. And the reality is, no one individual has answers or has complete answers. We have partial answers. And so if you think of the big answer that's ultimately going to form as a tapestry, each of us brings one or more threads. That's our own uniqueness, our perspective, our experience, our wisdom. I guarantee you, Alex knows things about software that I've never dreamed of, and maybe vice versa. And so, but the point is, if we all bring our unique perspectives and talents and passions and experiences and whatever wisdom we've accumulated, we can co-create a really rich tapestry of solutions. And what's interesting is Stuart Scott told me that if the average client scientist is right at the center of the distribution, he's maybe 2 or 3 sigma, towards the, whether you call it the pessimistic extreme, the Guy McPherson extreme, the reality extreme. And then he says, but Guy McPherson is several more standard deviations away than I am. It almost felt to me like I was having a conversation about the Academy Awards. It's like, well, I really like this actor, but most of the other judges don't, so I don't think he's going to take it, right? What is this? The Academy Awards? The truth is whatever the truth is, so I really don't think you're going to find one human being who has all the answers, and I really think the key is collective intelligence. And I'll say more about that in a minute, but first I'm going to go on mute and give other folks a chance to talk.
I just have a quick, I just would like to hear other people's input, and just talk a little bit more about shading, global shading. Because, to me, when I want to get out of the sun, I look for shade. It just seems to me one of the, considering how grim things are, one of the only potential options. And like one of the things I think about is like the Kessler syndrome, which is basically that there's already a lot of objects in low Earth orbit. So I was just curious what other people thought about shading and how it might actually be feasible in the Arctic, specifically in the Arctic.
Totally. Well, I'm happy to address that. Let me do a screen share so I can pull up my whiteboard in the form of an iPad. So if this is the, oh shoot, I hate it when it does that. Let me resize it. Okay. So if this is the northern, the North Pole, the Arctic region, and here you've got the Arctic ice. Let's say this is the remaining Arctic ice, and the rest is, dark blue ocean, which I'll just represent like this dark blue color. Okay. So I'll just recap this mainly for the audience. I think everyone on the call knows what we're talking about here. But basically, the sunlight that's coming in, if it hits the dark blue ocean, it gets absorbed, and that adds to the heat. I'll just shade it in like red here. But on the other hand, if the sunlight hits the ice, it bounces away back into space, or 80% of it does, or whatever fraction. So
I don't just do this for me, Jamin. I understand this.
Oh no, it's not for you. This. I just want to get everyone up on a general baseline, and so as this Arctic shrinks, as the Arctic sea ice shrinks, we get more and more absorption of heat. It's just a massive addition of heat. I'll just put it as a big plus sign. We're adding heat to the planet. So that's one great tragedy. The other is, of course, just the loss of the ice itself. If you think of this remaining ice, which is shrinking at a huge rate, this ice is essentially the equivalent of a bank account for absorbing heat, just like a company has a bank account to absorb losses or when it has big bills to pay. So we're absorbing more heat, we're losing the bank account, and then, of course, releasing all the methane. So how do we reverse this situation? And what I've proposed are basically two fundamental high-level ways of reversing this situation. One of those is to create essentially artificial mirrors over on the deep blue ocean part of where we've already lost ice. And so sunlight that would be absorbed by the deep blue ocean gets reflected away by these mirrors. How do we make these mirrors? There's myriad ways of doing it. There's spraying ocean water into the air to create clouds, which are white and therefore reflect away the sunlight. I've talked before about thin film reflective materials, and other potentially interesting, innovative solutions include, like, what if we put a bunch of floating balls in the Arctic Ocean that are white or metallic color, right? Like these little blobs I'm drawing here, that could reflect it away. So I'll just put here balls, for lack of a better word. But there's lots of ways of reflecting away the sunlight, but the basic concept is so, in my mind, obvious. We're losing the natural mirror of the Arctic sea ice. Let's replace it with artificial mirrors. Simple as that. And, please don't be scared by the word artificial. I think there's a lot more things to be scared about than the application of something artificial to save life on Earth, such as the loss of life on Earth. So anyway, so that's,
sorry,
yeah.
when you say mirrors, like you're thinking of like a literal mirror, like what I use in the bathroom.
Well, it would have the mirror effect. It wouldn't be a big, hard glass-backed mirror. Imagine, for example, like a massive sheet of ultralight and sufficiently strong thin film plastic sheet, which has 10 layers of steel at the top, deposited through an appropriate industrial process that effectively acts like a giant mirror, right? That's what I'm talking about. This kind of thing. Now, how would you suspend this big sheet of thin film reflective material? Well, you could do it in a combination of ways. You could have, a whole bunch of buoys, stable buoys, which support it at not just the corners, but various points in between. That in turn could be supported by blimps, helping keep it up at various points in the middle. There's lots of ways of supporting that. But anyway, so I hope I'm answering your question there, Aram. Jump in if I'm not. But the headline is reflect that sunlight back into space, reflect that energy back into space, which is what the Arctic sea ice has been doing. It's just not doing it enough anymore because there's only half of it left in terms of surface area, much less than half in terms of volume, of course. So anyway, reflect, reflect, reflect. And these are three ways of reflecting. That's one way.
Hey, Jamie, I have another idea.
Yeah.
That I wanted to bring up. So the HAARP, that's already in place and stuff. And what I understand is it can adjust climate. It can do things. So
what about HAARP? You said? What's that?
Yeah, it's called HAARP.
Well, please enlighten us, because I don't know what it is, and I assume others.
I'm not real familiar with it or anything, but it has to do with the Star Wars technology that Ronald Reagan developed, and it was supposed to be able to shoot down missiles that were coming into us, so we would have this grid or protecting the United States. But apparently, it can also do other things, and from what I've heard, it can cause weather pattern changes, focal points, and I'm not sure about all that, but I wonder about if that couldn't be used because it's already in place.
Okay, so let's wait till we have someone on who if you're on now or if you join later, who can tell us more about that, that would be good to know.
Jamin, could I just quickly jump in? One of the things that we keep coming up against is they got to know, right? The top level scientists in the Navy, in the Air Force, etc., in the intelligence community, they've got to know. They're sworn to secrecy, but they've got to know. So, just the same way as we know, or Guy McPherson says that over and over again. Yeah, I'm sure they know. Well, if they know, so for example, let's say they already know how to refreeze the Arctic, kind of using some of the strategies that you're talking about. They already know that. They already have, in a sense, potential resources, like the militaries all over the world. These are individuals who can be quickly mobilized to do things. And so if they know, then the question becomes, what are they doing or what are they thinking? And that's a legitimate thing to really focus on. And I think that, it's an interesting kind of dynamic because, we've had all sorts of stories and books and movies about, aliens invading Earth. And then everybody's going to come together, all the countries, all the racial divisions, the nationalistic divisions, etc. We're all going to be humanity fighting the invasion from outer space. It's a theme that's been around for a long time. What's happening now, the meltdown in the Arctic and other feedbacks that are connected with that and beyond that are happening right now. And so it could be something which could theoretically unite people together. Let's solve it. But on the other hand, there's also the problem of our hardwired tribalism, which dictates maybe something different. So, for example, if the highest levels of science in the militaries around the world and the intelligence communities sworn to secrecy, they understand what's happening. They may be trying to enact a strategy where we're going to let the ravages of abrupt climate change decimate certain areas of the globe, because they will get decimated before the developed world is unable to cope. So you have the African continent, you have parts of Southeast Asia, other parts of the globe. And it may be that they're calculating something along the lines of, we need to depopulate the globe so we can have a viable globe. We do have strategies. And I just bring this up because it just seems to me so frustrating to if you assume, and you have to assume, they know. I mean, they've got to know. Why wouldn't they know? And you have these climate scientists who are very timorous. Like Peter Wadham steps out there somewhat, but a lot of them are afraid. They're afraid, or they're by nature, as I mentioned last week, they're completely attached to the null hypothesis. We have to see again and again and again before we can say there's a connection, that kind of thinking. But I do think that we need to be out front and discuss from the assumption, if they know, what is it that they're planning to do, what is going on. And I'm going to mute out. Sorry for taking so much time.
You bring up a good point there, Daniel. They know. I mean, I'm with you. They know, and there are techniques out there such as HAARP. Well, it may be that they want the population reduction, but they don't want to do it. So maybe they're counting on the melting of the Arctic, and they're counting on a lot of people to die. And then when enough people die, maybe they have a plan to focus on the Arctic and refreeze it. I don't know. That may be that may be what's going on. I don't know.
Can I say something about to the fact that they know we're not? So, and I think this gets into a root of a problem. I just want to say before I go to this, I see everything as a structuralist. So I don't go like into any conspiracy thing, or in my opinion of like they may want to kill people or they have this secret plan to erode the population. I just see everything as you are simply was a cog in this machine. You can call it civilization or capitalism or whatever. But they've known, like you said, they've known since 1973. They knew before Hansen went to Congress in '69. Though actually, whoever New York is suing them over that right now, that we found their leaked reports they knew in 1973. But I also think why climate change is the devil of all issues in that it varies by degree. So I think if you go up high up, the Pentagon lists climate change as the #1 threat. Now, Trump doesn't think so, and even Obama didn't give a shit, in my opinion. Emissions went up under Obama. But in terms of to the individual level, I think there's just cognitive dissonance on the individual level where, let's just say you're the guy and you could save it. You're the guy at the Pentagon who could give the order to refreeze the Arctic. He's probably rich enough and closed off enough to think he can live on a mountain and global dimming, and he may not know about global dimming. They may not actually know enough, or they may just think it will be okay. He's old enough, they got through World War I, they got through the Red Scare, or whatever, all these incidents, right? Because up to this point, America's been #1. If you're alive, you have to be really old. You have to be like Noam Chomsky's age, 88, to remember when we weren't #1. And so I just think there's, on the individual level, if you actually have the power to do something, you're ready. You got your mansion on the island. You're ready for the sea level to rise. You think you can survive species extinction, global dimming, methane. You're okay. And so that's what I think happens on the individual level. So it's just the same old story where the rich are going to let the poor die, except this time I think the poor is all of us. I think we're all poor in that natural way. And I just don't think I think just on the individual level they are that brazen. Because for them to actually fix the problem at this point, it is so late in the game. Personally, I do not think we can fix the problem. I saw a video when Jamin actually talked about, letting our species die gracefully. I gladly accept that because I am very concerned as a 25-year-old about the violence. Oh my God, the violence over whatever, if this takes 6 months for us all to die or 20 years, the violence as the elites try to keep their hold on power will be amazing. As they have nuclear war, they have a surveillance state, thanks to Edward Snowden. I mean, I can't even go into how sad the violence will be between us as they still most of the violence will be from the elites trying to hang on to whatever the fuck, because when there's no food left, because you can't grow grains anymore or something. That's the thing I scare about the most. Like, I'm willing to accept my death, even though it may be cut short at 35, or I may live 2 more years, or in Guy McPherson's time, it's like 1 year. But that's just something I agree with that. It's the devil. Sorry, just to repeat my problem. It's the devil of all issues, and I think it's an individual thing and it's a collective thing. The collective intelligence knows it's this bad. They knew before. It's just like smoking. If you watch Merchants of Doubt, they knew it was bad when they invented the product. They know it's bad, and I just think they both look around and like whoever X guy looks to Y guy and they're both in power and they say, hey, we're both okay. They have their ice fortress or whatever. They've got their space pod to try to get to Mars. Not to the extent that I just don't think they can imagine any situation where they're not in power. And that's why they've risen to the top. They're the greedy, selfish MFers they are. Anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah, these are really good points. I think the bottom line is that they know and they don't know. They know because they're exposed to all kinds of facts and the Jason Group and the Pentagon and U.S. Naval Postgraduate School and all the data. So they know the data. But just imagine, I'm just going to call one on myself. There's a certain degree of hubris when Jamin Shively says, hey, we can get together and with collective intelligence, we can refreeze the Arctic and shut down nuclear and do all these wonderful things. There's a certain amount of hubris that's baked into those kind of statements. Well, if I can have that hubris for the collective, it's not that far of a stretch, or in this case, a contraction, to suppose that I can have this kind of hubris as an individual, right? So if I'm a wealthy individual or a powerful person in government, I can have the hubris that we're going to survive this. I've got it all planned out between our underground bunker in the Midwest and our, this and that and stockpiles of food. And, we're sitting pretty here in government, we're going to be fine. Right. And, in fact, it's interesting. I reached out to one of the more well-known professors at Berkeley, Daniel Kamen, who's had all kinds of high positions and board seats in government and academia. I mean, his resume is probably the most impressive I've ever seen. Obviously a brilliant guy, PhD in physics from Harvard. And so anyway, he's in charge of these like energy programs and stuff at Berkeley. So I invited him to come and speak at, the Sierra Club dinner for day after tomorrow. And at first he said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. And then when I told him Guy McPherson was going to be there and we're talking about refreezing the Arctic and shutting down nuclear, he says, well, I can't back that. I can't support refreezing the Arctic using methods other than sequestering carbon. I mean, come on, we might have 12 months to refreeze the Arctic, on the order of 12 months. Sequestering carbon, you can't get there from here. You simply can't get there from here. And so it makes me wonder, what is this very, very bright, educated, connected, powerful person, saying, oh, no, I can't be a part of that. My hypothesis is that these folks who are so loaded with money and prestige and power, they simply cannot accept that their world is going away, right? They can't accept it. It just does not compute. They've got children and, they're living the good life. They've made a buttload of money on some IPOs and whatnot. And, they're in this is when the party is just getting good. Don't tell me the party's going to end. Hurricane Victoria, I know you got something to say, so I'm going to go on mute. Back to you. Oh, your microphone's muted, Hurricane.
Sorry, it's 6. That's just insane that he would not show up. I'm sorry. I'm stunned by it, yet not surprised.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And, so someone that bright, that connected, that dialed in with the information and the math and knowing everything else, backs away. And, I called him up, left him a voice message, sent him an email and said, look, this is all good news. If you don't have to agree with any points that we're making. Come and if you think that either refreezing the Arctic is either A, not going to happen, B, going to happen, but it's not a problem, or C, we can prevent it or mitigate it in some other way, we need to know that. Come tell us. All right. But not a peep back on that. I really think the blinders are really extreme. And you're dealing with prestige, ego, money, the addictive substance. You've got all these things that are constraining people from seeing reality and taking appropriate action. There's a whole bunch of people, this same professor included, who have made a bunch of money on like solar and all these, new emerging sectors for sustainability and all that. So, the way I look at it is this whole class of people, Al Gore included, they're all so attached to getting what I call their gold star at the end of the day. Remember when we were kids, whether we're in school or at home, if we were good, we'd get a gold star, right? And so we get that whole dopamine cycle going on. Well, I think this whole class of people that is so attached to getting their gold star for having invested in solar 5 years ago or whatever, they cannot accept that payday is not coming, right? And that we're in a whole different world. It's just a lot to assimilate. And I don't care how educated you are, or how rich you are, that those are not prerequisites to getting it. To get it, you got to have something special. That something special is well represented with the folks in this virtual room. God bless all of you. And how do we get that? How do we transmit that something special to the rest of humanity? Right? That's the big question that we're grappling with. By the way, it's 11:03, so I do need to adjourn this meeting, and I'm about to kick off the next one in literally about 3 minutes, and then we'll start broadcasting in more like 10 minutes. But I will kick it off in 3. I'll email you all. I know Hurricane, I know you got another commitment, and I'm really happy to see you on this one. Thank you so much for joining. And the next one will be on
Radical. Have a great week. Have a great week. Love you.
You too, Hurricane. Love you too, sister. Okay, we'll see you soon. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching and joining. Hopefully some or all of you can make it to the next one. I'll send out the link, the invite, and we'll see you there. It'll be on Radical Collective Intelligence, and then an hour later on A New Story for Humanity. Thank you all so much. Any last words that can be squeezed in 10 seconds or less, go for it. Otherwise, I will stop broadcasting momentarily. All right.